Let's get to read on all of this with Wall Street Journal editorial page writer Jillian Melchior. We've got Market Watch extraordinaire. This guy's brilliant, Dave Maney. We've also got Deirdre Bolton. All right. Jillian, I'm looking at this. I'm seeing what could happen in all these states. The feeling seems to be that Republicans are behind the eight ball, whether you're talking West Virginia, which should be potentially a pickup for them, maybe given this drama, maybe not for the Senate, but that they're certainly endangered in the House. So are the numbers that you're getting, and they can be, wild and all over the place, are they hinting at that?
Well, I mean, it does seem like somewhat of an uphill battle. And I think we have to take into consideration as well other races that have happened since then. I think Pennsylvania is a really good example. Conor Lamb's victory, Democrats were able to take that seat in a district that could have gone heavily for Trump. So I think it's an uphill battle. And when you have situations like in West Virginia where there is a real division, where there's a candidate, where there's a question of whether he could actually beat the Democrat, that's where things get a little interesting.
They do. They do. The Senate is one thing, right? I mean, I think right now, Deirdre, and in a lot of your reporting, I mean, it would be a tougher move there to take the Senate, but the House, maybe.
Yeah, that does seem to be consensus. I know even from our colleagues at the Journal. I mean, but just listening to our colleague there with Don Blankenship, I keep thinking of Roy Moore. And I know you made the allusion to Pennsylvania, but what the Republicans certainly don't want is another situation like what we saw in Alabama when a completely unsuitable candidate, right, is put forward. So, but to get back to the point, yeah, I think the House, most people are saying, is up for grabs in the sense that even though the president carried 3 of these states that we're going to be watching tonight, they still could go blue. The Senate a little bit more on the 50-50 line.
Do you know, the markets are always factor in anticipated developments, Dave. Now, that's the consensus. And as you've reminded me of the many years, consensus can be wrong. That was wrong in 2016. So who's to say we're getting this awfully wrong going into tonight?
We could be getting it wrong. I mean, one of the things that it appears to me is that this is developing along the kind of the real fault lines, like the disruption lines of the two-party system, right? These are just as President Trump is very much a kind of does not fit into that traditionally either cup and manages to irritate people on both sides. So does Blankenship. You have other candidates, you got independent candidates in a couple of states, Dave Dodson in Wyoming, Neil Simon in Maryland. And these are people they're running outside the rule sets. And it reminds me a lot of what we keep seeing come out of the Valley, where it's like, well, you can't sell life insurance that way. You can't run wealth management that way. But disruptive models are working that way. And I think that's what's at work in these candidates like
So the drain the swamp candidates, to your point, may have a better chance no matter what side of the aisle they're on?
I think that the idea of somebody who's a butt-kicking, truth-telling, maybe a little less, kind of on the edge lifestyle-wise than the president, but that sort of candidate, that he might be an unacceptable candidate, this Blankenship guy, except that he's nudging around the top end of the Republican Party polls.
Sure, and I think to your point about being a disruptor, it's been really fascinating, particularly in West Virginia, watching all these candidates on the GOP side position themselves as who can be the Trumpiest. It's a personality, I think, also that voters are looking at. They want somebody who's essentially going to give the middle finger to Washington.
Particularly in West Virginia, right? I mean, that's the state the president scored his biggest victory by the biggest margin, 40 points. But I'm wondering if it carries over. The one thing we've missed is the growing popularity about people feeling better about the economy, maybe a little bit about the tax cuts, that the underpinnings, which would tend to favor the incumbent party in the White House, aren't being reflected in these polls. Do you guys buy that?
Well, and then in some of these Midwestern states like Indiana, we haven't heard from the president at all, right, about choosing a candidate. But to your point, we were talking about these state budgets, some of which are in the Midwest, which actually have surpluses, thanks in part to in theory, this trickle-down Trump administration tax plan, which went into effect December 2017. We were talking about Minnesota and Utah actually having more than $300 million of state budget surplus. I haven't seen the words state budget surplus in a very long time.
And states that sorely need. Connecticut came to mind. But what do you make of all this? And that's not being appreciated.
Look, I'm from Colorado, as you guys know, and I've seen some of the polling from that Wyoming race where this independent's challenging Barrasso, and there's a kind of a low-profile Democrat, and people are ticked off at the party apparatuses, and the bad word to say in Wyoming is Mitch McConnell. that were, you know, a solidly Republican state, and they're having their backs up because of huge government deficits and because nothing's getting done in the Congress. And so I believe it's dealer's choice or fielder's choice out there in West Virginia.
All right, guys, I want to thank you very much.